Namaste, Namaskar, and Vanakkam to all of you. We are in Chennai, that's why Vanakkam I said. In fact, today, in the time of social distancing, when people are saying not to do the handshake, I think Namaste is the best way. I welcome our viewers to this particular session of the Web Talk. Now, in this lockdown phase, when most of us we were at home, and those who have kids in their house, these pictures are quite familiar to each one of them. A superhero is having the supernatural power, who is dedicated to fight the evil of the universe, protect the public, and battle the supervillains. This is all these pictures are quite familiar to us. Now, in the these are the superheroes, but in the fight against COVID-19, you are the real superhero. And so a big thank you to all the doctors, to all the viewers of the evening. A big thank you to each one of you. Now, I take this opportunity to share with you that when you were all fighting COVID and fighting at the leading from the front, now we at Chennai, at Tablets India, we were also involved in some special activity. Tablets India actually have been distributing 1100 freshly cooked food packets every day to the people who are under the below poverty line and who lost their daily wages since the first lockdown period. And this is in collaboration with our Annadanam Center, which is located at Tondiarpet, Chennai. In fact, you can see some of the pictures, and you also can see some of the paper cuttings which were published in the local daily. So this is our corporate social responsibility. As a part of that, we have been doing this, and it will continue till the time this lockdown continues, and we propose to do it in the days to come also.
Much time. Now I express my heartfelt thanks to all the viewers inside Odisha and outside Odisha for this webinar. Now I request my energetic and vibrant secretary, our secretary, Dr. Prashant Sawant, to take over, and he will do the next thing. He will introduce the moderator and our coordinator. Thank you. Mr. Sir, Dr. Prashant Sawant, please. Dr. Prashant.
To unmute. Mr. Kar, you have to unmute.
Yeah. Good afternoon, everybody.
Good afternoon, sir.
Yeah, I welcome all the faculty members who are here to discuss on this vibrant topic. Dr. Arjit, Dr. Mrityunjay, Dr. Joshi, Susrut. I am really thankful to them for sparing their time, and also it is such a nice thing to see more than 90 participants who are participating today in today's discussion. We will be discussing about myths and facts about the probiotic. And recently I was going through an article where it was mentioned about the breastfeeding and probiotic, that how even in the breast milk there are the elements of prebiotics and probiotic, both in the form of different oligosaccharides. So this is such an important thing which talks about GI tracts, which talk about the colon, how these molecules, how these prebiotics passes through the stomach, passes through the intestine, facing acidic environment, facing all enzymes and going to colon, and how it is helping to develop immunity, to control diarrhea. There are so many things in this. Let's hope this will be very useful for us. I wish all the best from my side, and IAP Odisha will be organizing such webinars in the lockdown, much more things. And I also encourage our young speakers who are ready to share their experience to come forward and write a mail to me or WhatsApp me. I am available at a call, so reach, so that we can organize such webinars which will be learning. So happy learning and stay safe and stay healthy. Thank you. Handing over to Sushrut.
Thank you, sir. Thank you, IPURISA, and thank you, Faculty India, for this great scientific session.
Please.
Let's start the session. I would like to invite our moderator, Dr. Joshi, to start the session, please.
Thank you, Dr. Sushrut. So, I welcome you all to this great session of probiotics. We are having a very eminent speaker for the topic. Dr. Ashen Parida is a very senior pediatrician, and he has done a very good study in probiotics. Dr. Arijit Mahapatra is a senior neonatologist, and Dr. Mutinja Das, he is a professor in KIMS Hospital. So in next 1 hour, we'll be discussing, and you will be getting a very good study regarding probiotics. So what are the uses of probiotics? So just starting my first slide. So we'll discuss what is the current and novel uses of probiotics. So as per the WHO, the probiotics is the live microorganism which, when administered in adequate amount, confer a health benefit to the host. So in our day-to-day practice, we as a pediatrician, we are using a lot of probiotics in different conditions. So we should be learning a very good thing in next 1 hour. So probiotics, which are the part and parcel of our life, how they are modulating the different immune system of our body, different the GI system of our body. So next, please. Yeah. So the application of the probiotics in the target specific human subpopulation, it can be used in healthy individuals, children, elderly, and ill persons, and in immunocompromised also. So next, please. Next slide. So probiotic which maintain the healthy flora, they enhance the mucosal barrier integrity and modulation of the immune system. So before going or before choosing any probiotics, we should have it should have a fundamental property. That is, it should be from human origin, non-pathogenic, resistant to destruction, acid bile tolerance, regulation of immune response. Next. So just I'm briefing you how the nomenclature of the probiotics come from. Suppose we take an example of Lactobacillus rhamnosus GG with ATCC. Sorry, it's printed wrongly. ATCC and 53103 means Lactobacillus is the genus, Rhamnosus is the species, and GG is the strain who has by whom the name has been coined, like Gorbach and Goldin. And ATCC is the American Type Culture Collection Accession Number. So any probiotic will be named as per this nomenclature. So I will invite our first speaker, Dr. Ashen Parida, to take the session on acute diarrhea and antibiotic associated diarrhea. I welcome Dr. Parida sir. Dr. Ashen Parida, please sir.
Mr. Kar, you have to unmute Dr. Parida.
Unmute the speaker.
As you have chosen the topic today, probiotic is not new to pediatric use. And when I was a student, or many of the seniors were students, by that time also probiotic was used in acute diarrhea. And coming to the basics of acute diarrhea, what I can tell that acute diarrhea occurs when it is one of the commonest causes of children attending to the OPD. And that is the reason most of us during our practice will get every day about 3-4 cases of acute diarrhea. And nowadays, if you define diarrhea as we have been taught, or you have been taught, what we can cite that that to be increase in volume, change in consistency, and this should be liquid stool and frequency is more. But it may be associated with dehydration, may not be associated with dehydration. As I have told you, this is one of the major causes of death in under 5 age group, and the most common organism which affects children is rotavirus, which occurs in almost 50% of the cases, and most of the cases occur during first 2 years of life. And acute diarrhea has been treated with various drugs and various modalities of treatment were available, but lately with the advent of ORS, the treatment of acute diarrhea has miraculously changed, and one of the eminent persons who brought ORS to India and who studied most is Dr. Ban, who is no more. He passed away in the month of February. And but then people have started using probiotics for treatment of acute diarrhea, and World Health Organization also recommends probiotics to be used in acute diarrhea. Of course, ORS, probiotics, zinc, and vitamin A. These are the things which normally comes for the treatment of acute diarrhea. Next, please. And this is, if you go back to the searching the literature, you can find a lot of literature starting from 2000 or little earlier to that, and many of them they have recommended different strains of probiotic to be used in acute diarrhea, but randomized control trial or RCTs are available from 2004 and 2007 onwards. And I am quoting one of the studies which was published in Acta Pediatricia in 2007. They have used Saccharomyces boulardii, ORS, and what they have found that a group which was getting Saccharomyces boulardii plus ORS, their duration was shorter, 4.7 days in comparison to 6 days in case of 6.2 days in placebo group. Even Lancet as early as 2010, they have suggested that according to the recommendation of European Society of Pediatric Gastroenterology, they have told that apart from providing ORS, if you can upgrade the treatment with addition of probiotics. Well, that was the recommendation of the Lancet. Now coming to the, well, we know that probiotic can be used in acute diarrhea, but how do they work? We have been using probiotic in various forms in acute diarrhea, but as Dr. Ranjit has told, the probiotics, they have different modes of action in different entities. Suppose coming to the acute diarrhea, what I am going to discuss today, colonization, the first stage is colonization and normalization of the abnormal gut flora. You know that when you take one particular strain of probiotic, because probiotics are very, very strain specific, because if you say that I am giving lactobacillus, well, that doesn't mean anything. It should be lactobacillus with a particular strain, and it has got a repository number, as it has been mentioned that this was American strain, something like that. It should have got names as well as strain number. This particular strain, when it is taken, most of that they are taken orally. So when it passes to the stomach, well, they should not be destroyed. It should not be affected by biles. Then it goes to the colon and colonizes there. And what it does there, by going there, colonization, I means the organism sticks in and it grows. Not that it goes there and passed in the stool, it is not working. So probiotic to work, it has to colonize in the gut and it will provide it action as, but you can't expect miracles from probiotic. That means you are taking probiotic today, tomorrow the child will be all right. Don't think that, because it is a live organism, it will take some time to stick in and it will replicate or it will grow, then only it will produce its action. As I have told you previously, this is colonization and competitive exclusion of pathogens, because the colon, it has got a specific area on which the probiotic, if the probiotic colonize, then the pathogens who are there, they will not have a chance to sit over there. And this is produces the probiotics by the mechanism of their metabolism. They produce volatile fatty acids, which are one way that doesn't allow pathogenic organism to grow. Next, please. And they produce a cell adhesion, modulation of the immune system, that is the through the T helper cells, and interaction with the brain gut axis. This is one important thing. Brain and gut, there are different axes. When you go ahead with the probiotic treatment, we can come across as long gut axis, mammary gut axis. Different axes are there on which through which the probiotic they do work. So these are the mechanism on which the probiotic first they should colonize, they should express mechanically or something like that. They will expel the pathogenic organism to have their hold in the GI tract. They will modulate the immune system and they will produce some substances which will be harmful for pathogenic organism. So these are the mechanism on which the probiotic will act in acute diarrhea. Next, please. So as I have told you, probiotics exhibit 10 specific difference in their resistance to bile acid as well as stomach acids and ability to colonize in the GI tract for clinical efficiency. And I can quote one Indian study, a recent study of 2014, which was published in Indian Journal of Medical Research. And what they have done a study on 200 children who have got two groups. One got probiotics plus full prescribed treatment. Another group was placebo plus full prescribed treatment. And the probiotic which was used was LGG, Lactobacillus rhamnosus GG, with a spore strength of 10 billion colony forming unit. Because as per the definition, the probiotics should be taken in an adequate amount so that they can exert their action. So the dose was 10 billion CFUs per dose, and it was given for 5 days. What they have found, the duration of hospital stay was shorter and stool was better consistency, so that the parents, they were more confident to take the child home earlier. And there is another study which said that they have also used Lactobacillus rhamnosus GG, and they have found out the reduction of diarrhea, and the difference between control and treatment group was around 3 days. So all of them, they show that use of probiotics in acute diarrhea can reduce the duration of hospital stay and recovery is faster. Next, please. So coming to that, well, probiotics do help in reducing acute diarrhea. That is proved, and different strains are there. As we have mentioned one strain like Lactobacillus rhamnosus GG, but there are other strains also like Saccharomyces boulardii, Lactobacillus plantarum, and many other strains which can also act in acute diarrhea. But whether do we recommend to use all cases of acute diarrhea a probiotic? Well, you are the best source for it. Universal, because now we have got universal rotavirus vaccination. I have told you that 50% of the cases of acute diarrhea, they are viral origin, and rotavirus is one of them. And by universal rotavirus vaccination, definitely we are going to reduce the cost, reduce the illness, seriousness of the illness, and many kids are not getting admitted to the hospital nowadays. And one bad thing is that instead of only giving ORS, zinc, vitamin A, and providing proper diet to the kids, people are starting antibiotics in acute diarrhea. Well, this is a very, very bad practice. This type of modality of treatment is never taught to undergraduates in the medical school or to the postgraduates during their course of residency. But invariably, when you get a prescription, because we have seen the prescriptions of acute diarrhea, the kids which are coming with complication, most of them, they have got antibiotics, but starting from amikacin to ceftriaxone and many more things, they don't need that, and that is rather harmful to many ways to the kids, and that should be avoided. Improving personal hygiene, and now we have got Swachh Bharat Abhiyan, that is also helping the kids not to suffer from diarrhea, self drinking water, and education. And moreover, which is the one of the limiting factors of prescribing probiotic for all cases of acute diarrhea is the cost of the drug. And so it is left to you whether you use it, but there is definite recommendation that it does work in acute diarrhea and can be reducing the duration of hospital stay for the kids. Well, that is about acute diarrhea. Now I'll come to antibiotic associated diarrhea. Well, I have told you that antibiotic associated diarrhea occurs when the people get antibiotic where it is not needed or needed but getting it for prolonged period of time. Well, the incidence of antibiotic diarrhea varies from 5% to 39% in OPD and inpatient settings. Increase hospital stay because the child has got antibiotic for the primary illness and that is prolonged, and the non-child ends up in diarrhea. So increased healthcare cost for both kid as well as for the state. And another important situation, well, in pediatric practice we may not get many cases, but when you use multiple antibiotics for eradicating H. pylori, that can in the long run lead to antibiotic associated diarrhea. Next please. I will come to one pathophysiology. Why does antibiotic diarrhea occurs? Well, whatever antibiotic you take, most of them, I mean all of them, that not absorbed to the system. Some of them is left behind in the gut, and that is the luminal availability which is left inside the gut. That is also that the amount which is luminally available for a particular antibiotic, that contributes to antibiotic associated diarrhea. Next please. These are the common antibiotics which I told you are prescribed in children. Maybe for diarrhea, as I have told you, in acute diarrhea someone is by mistake have given it, or for other systemic infections when antibiotic has been used, mostly oral antibiotics, cefixime, cefotaxime, paxital, amoxiclav, azithromycin also, cefuroxime, all these antibiotics, mostly what it has been seen that if the kid gets oral antibiotics for prolonged period of time, they do land up in antibiotic associated diarrhea. As I have told you, you can find out that for cefixime it is almost 60% is unabsorbed left inside the gut. Cefuroxime it is 50% which is not absorbed. Amoxiclav almost 60%, azithromycin 60%, and cefuroxime 65% or 40 to 60%, something that which is left inside the gut. So what antibiotic does, it when the antibiotic goes inside the gut, it kills the pathogens as well as kills the normal organisms which are present inside the gut, creating a state of dysbiosis inside the gut lumen. So when the pathogenic organism, they take a chance to overgrow, naturally they will not produce diarrhea because they are producing some toxins, as well as they are producing malabsorption due to these toxins, as well as some metabolite which doesn't absorb the substances, food substances well. So there are two things involved. One is dysbiosis as well as malabsorption that produces antibiotic associated diarrhea. Next please. So what we have got for the treatment of antibiotic associated diarrhea? Well, if antibiotic is being there, so you have to stop it. And because when you are giving antibiotic, they increase the growth of opportunistic pathogens. As I have told you, accumulation of undigested carbohydrates. Probiotic is known to change bile acid composition, and they directly interact with the intestinal epithelium and immune system to normalize the gut flora. Next please. Next please. And they produce short chain fatty acids, other secreted metabolites such as bacteriocins. Because these bacteriocins are important, they can hamper the metabolism of pathogenic organisms and kill them, and luminal pH level and oxygen level they reduce, so that the pathogenic organism, they don't survive longer. So these are the armamentariums at our disposal for treatment of antibiotic associated diarrhea. Next please. So let us come back to a few studies which says that how probiotic have been useful. So this is the meta-analysis of 60 randomized control trial, and which has seen that reduction of antibiotic associated diarrhea is definite with products giving probiotics, because the p-value is less than 0.001 and confidence limit is 0.5 to 0.68. And another study is there, probiotics significantly also reduce antibiotic associated diarrhea. And what are the probiotics? Normally, it has been studied in antibiotic-associated diarrhea is Lactobacillus rhamnosus ggs, Bifidobacterium lactis, and Streptococcus thermophilus. These are the Saccharomyces boulardii. These are the commonly studied probiotics which are used in antibiotic-associated diarrhea. But more studies are available for Saccharomyces boulardii as well as Rhamnosus gg. But almost they are equal in their action. It is you to choose them. Next, please. So what you have seen that Lactobacillus rhamnosus gg and Saccharomyces boulardii having the most evidence to support use in these conditions. Next, please. Well, there is another entity which I am just thinking to take it separately because this is Clostridium difficile infection. Some people add it with antibiotic associated diarrhea. Some people take it as a separate entity. So it is important because this is a condition which can produce chronic diarrhea to acute diarrhea and life-threatening inflammation of the colon and toxic megacolon. And mostly this affects elders who are in the hospital with immunocompromised state. But surprisingly, it can also affect people who are thought to be not at risk. And young people, they can also get Clostridium difficile diarrhea. And what are the drugs? Cephalosporin, penicillin, clindamycin, proton pump inhibitors, and fluoroquinones, if they are used, because I'm sure that these drugs are being used in pediatric practice. And be careful that these drugs can land someone to toxic megacolon and Clostridium difficile infection. Next, please. So, Clostridium difficile infection has a relapse rate of 6 to 8% from discharge to in coming 2 to 3 weeks, and there is evidence that Saccharomyces boulardii combined with high dose of vancomycin is effective better than vancomycin alone. Bacillus clausii and Lactobacillus rhamnosus, they are also used in Clostridium difficile diarrhea, and fecal transfer, microbiota transfer, as it will be taken by our other panelists. That is also a modality of treatment. Thank you.
Thank you, sir. Thank you, Dr. Pereda, sir, for your elaborative talk. So, few other causes he has very nicely talked about the acute diarrhea and antibiotic-associated diarrhea. So, we'll be taking with Dr. Mrutyunjay Das, he will be taking the inflammatory diarrhea and IBS, how the probiotic is going to help. Dr. Mrutyunjay, please.
So very good afternoon to one and all. Respected Sahu sir, Sabat sir, and my teacher Dr. Pereda sir. I am very happy to with as a panelist there with Dr. Pereda and Joshi bhai, Susrut is there, and Arjit sir also. So it's a 4th webinar of state IAP, I hope so. And this is a very important topic as everybody is prescribing in our day-to-day practice about probiotics nowadays. So as Dr. Pereda sir already told about the role of diarrhea in role of probiotics in antibiotic-associated diarrhea and acute diarrhea, I have to highlight the role of probiotics in inflammatory and non-inflammatory as well as in IBS. So as we all know that the definition of probiotics already Dr. Joshi has told you. So gradually I will point out what is the importance of this probiotic in inflammatory as well as non-inflammatory diarrhea. Before that, we have to know something about the inflammatory and non-inflammatory diarrhea. What are the important causes of inflammatory diarrhea? It may be bacterial, it may be viral, it may be protozoal. In bacterial causes, there may be two types. Either it may be cytotoxin producing or a mucosal invading. In cytotoxin producing, it is Clostridium difficile. In mucosal invasion type, it is Salmonella, Shigella, Yersinia, Campylobacter, Chlamydia, Neisseria gonorrhea also can cause, and Listeria. So these are the number of few bacteria which can cause inflammatory diarrhea. And in protozoa, Entaema histolytica is one of the commonest example, and in viral, CMV. Coming to the non-inflammatory part, where mostly the causes are mostly the viral cause, the Rota and Norwalk we usually face, but the majority of the time or in times we get in the reports having RBCs or post-cellular plenty. So in that case, free from enterotoxin type of infection like Staph aureus, Clostridium perfringens, Bacillus cereus are there, and enterotoxin producing like ET, EC, and Vibrio cholerae, which is Vibrio cholerae is nowadays very rare in our state. and in protozoa, Giardia and Cryptosporidium. So these are the important causes of inflammatory as well as non-inflammatory diarrhea. Next slide. Now the inflammatory diarrhea, the symptoms are fever, abdominal pain, tenesmus. So what is the importance of inflammatory diarrhea? There occurs mucosal invasion. Whatever the features will occur, that will due to the invasion of the organism into the intestinal epithelial mucosa. So there will be toxemia, there will be features of toxemia, there will be fever, abdominal pain, tenesmus, and it is usually the toxin producing bacteria cause invasion, and that is the reason. And next slide please. So how the probiotics will help in the inflammatory diarrhea? Probiotics secrete organic acid. Already Parida sir has discussed something about that. Probiotics secrete organic acids which lowers the intestinal pH and thereby kills the pathogenic bacteria. Bacillus mesentericus produces a nutrient called 3,3-dihydroxyazitidine, which helps in the proliferation of 32 species of bifidobacteria. And glutamine is the key for fuel of enterocyte, and it is needed in the adequate amount to maintain the intestinal mucosal integrity. Bifidobacteria helps the synthesis of glutamine from glutamic acid and ammonia, and thereby ensures the gut mucosal integrity. So what is the important take-home message from this slide is glutamine is the most important key factor for the enterocytes to maintain the mucosal integrity, and for the bifidobacteria helps in the synthesis of glutamine. Therefore, if you give bifidobacteria or if you provide bifidobacterium in the intestine, then glutamine synthesis can be there, and glutamine synthesis will help in the enterocytes maturation and makes the mucosal integrity more better. Coming to next slide. Now in non-inflammatory diarrhea, it is usually there is no mucosal invasion. There is occurs secretions of the luminal fluid. There will be secretory diarrhea, but sometimes bacterial parasite diarrhea also can cause, but there is no mucosal invasion. There will be nausea, vomiting, and there will be non-bloody stool sometimes and watery stool, but the volume of the stool usually larger. They promote intestinal secretion. Already I have told you, without significant disruption. There will be no intestinal mucosal invasion, and the intestinal mucosal disruption is not there. Next slide, please. So how probiotics will work in this condition? Probiotics will colonize and normalize the perturbed intestinal flora. Probiotics cause competitive expulsion of the pathogen, and probiotics secrete organic acids which lowers the intestinal pH. So almost the same mechanism in which the probiotics will be helpful in as well non-inflammatory as well as in the inflammatory diarrhea. Next slide, please. Now coming to the very important topic, that is the irritable bowel syndrome. Now after knowing this, the diarrhea, inflammatory diarrhea, acute diarrhea, antibiotic associated diarrhea, this is a type of entity which all of us face in our pediatric practice in day to day. The child will come to us, usually an adolescent child or in the late childhood period, like around 9 to 10 years child. They will come with the features of abdominal pain, vomiting, recurrent type of abdominal pain. So this is the Rome 4 criteria which I have discussed, or which I am telling to you today. That is the definition which is recently being brought by the pediatric Rome 4 criteria, and it includes all of the following for at least 2 months prior to the diagnosis, which is characterized by abdominal pain for at least 4 days per month, associated with one or more of the following, either in the frequency of the stool or change in the appearance of the stool, or constipation, where the pain is not relieved after constipation. So here 2 types of IBS. Now the Rome 4 has divided the IBS into 2 types. Either it may be a constipating type or maybe a diarrheogenic type. In the diarrheogenic type, we can have a frequency, more frequency or more liquid type of stool. Whereas a constipation variety, here the pain is not relieved after constipation as removed. Whereas in chronic constipation, if the constipation is there, the pain will be relieved. Little bit constipation improve, pain will be relieved. But here the pain is still there, even if the constipation has been relieved. Next slide, please. Now, what is the etiology of IBS? Lot of etiological factors, lot of interactive factors are there. But the main highlighting points are genetics, brain-gut interaction. Already Sarah has told a little bit about the brain-gut axis. Changes in the gastrointestinal motility, low-grade inflammation in the intestinal mucosa, visceral hypersensitivity, psychosocial disturbances, altered intestinal permeability, and finally the most important part is the change in the gut microbiota. So these are the important etiological factors, out of which we will discuss the gut microbiota. So how the probiotics will help in the IBS? It will increases the mucosal barrier. It will decreases the pH. How it will increases the mucosal barrier? Because it will create the organic acids. It will create that will decrease the pH and get a mucosal barrier type of layer over the intestine, so that the invasion will be protected. And the pain is very much important factor in IBS. IBS is the most notorious thing for causing pain, and repeated interval, the child will go to toilet for abdominal cramp and sensation of passing stool. So that pain is being induced by some receptors that is being reduced by the opioid and cannabidiol receptors. So there are certain pain receptors, and the visceral hypersensitivity will occur, and brain got hyperactivity will be there, and pain will be there. Out of which, if there is some receptor which is being reduced by the pain, by the induction of the opioid and cannabidiol receptors in the intestinal epithelium, that can reduce the pain and balance between the pro and anti-inflammatory cytokines. So this is also very important factor, whereas many cytokines are being produced in IBS, which will, let's slide please. So there are many, supposing T cells, there are T helper and T regulator cells. So one of them will have some type of mucosal inflammatory cells, and one of them maintain the mucosal homeostasis. So mucosal inflammation increased production of low inflammatory cytokines by the T helper cells. So you see there is a picture which is showing that one side is down, one side is up. That means the mucosal inflammatory, the pro-inflammatory cytokines are taking the leading part. So it is being more TNF alpha, IFN, interferon gamma, IL-17. So these are the pro-inflammatory cytokines. When this mucosal barrier or there is mucosal inflammation, this mucosal homeostasis is lost. Therefore, these pro-inflammatory cytokines are more produced. Next slide. So probiotics will help in maintaining this T helper and T regulator in a balanced state, so that the mucosal inflammation will be prevented. Therefore, all the features of the IBS can be protected. Next slide, please. Now, a little bit evidences. So, what I got from the recent literature about this randomized control trial from Dr. Kanifer, so is from Turkey. So, what is the study shows? It is a Bifidobacterium infantis compared with the efficacy that 1 into 10 to the power 8 colony forming unit per ml, and Lactobacillus GG in the dose of 1 into 10 to the power 10 colony forming unit per ml, and combinedly Lactobacillus GG, Lactobacillus rhamnosus LC705, Bifidobacterium brevi BB99, and Propionibacterium fledu species. Total amount of bacteria in the range of 8 to 9 into 10 to the power 9 colony forming unit. So what I want to say here that many probiotics are being studied in the prevention of IBS in children. Especially these studies are only in children, 4 to 18 years of age group. Adult studies are many, but pediatric studies are very few. So this is a good study which shows that Bifidobacterium infantis, LGG, and combination of LGG with rhamnosus and Bifidobacterium brevi are helpful, and the evidences shows that this is the dose 1 into 10 to the power 8 for Bifidobacterium, 1 into 10 to the power 10 for LGG, and 8 to 9 into 10 to the power 9 in combination form, where each equal amount. Next slide, please.
Thank you. Thank you, Dr. Mrityunjay. You have covered very elaborative and very nicely the IBS. So in our day-to-day practice, we are getting a lot of recurrent abdominal pain patients. So these cases can be treated with the help of Lactobacillus GG, Bifidobacterium brevi, and Propionibacterium. So before going to next topic, so I would request our esteemed viewer to put their question in QA section, so that at the end of the session we can take up the QA, all the QA, and you can mention the speaker also in that. If you, it's up to you, or else we will have a discussion over that. And so I request Dr. Arjit sir to take up the next slides. He will be covering the preterm neonates, the evidence of role of probiotics in preterm neonates. Dr. Arjit sir.
Thank you, Dr. Jose. So, as my previous panelists, Professor Parida and Professor Mrityunjay Das, has already elaborated the use of probiotics and their benefits in infective diarrhea, antibiotic-associated diarrhea, and other conditions like IBS and all that. So, next is what role the probiotics has got in the management of preterm neonates. As we know, the preterm neonates are quite a bulk of our neonatal intensive care units, and preterm birth rate is same over last so many decades worldwide, whether the standard of newborn care is improving or not. Still, the rate of prematurity remains the same, around 8 to 10%. And as we know, in the developing countries like India and Sub-Saharan Africa and Southeast Asia, we have got a huge number of premature babies which are born. So the obviously burden of the morbidity of the premature babies are quite a bit. So the most dreaded complication in the NICU of the premature babies, apart from keeping aside the respiratory issues like respiratory distress syndrome, is the necrotizing enterocolitis. So we all have seen so many cases of necrotizing enterocolitis in our day-to-day practice in the NICU, and that is one of the important factors which causes a lot of mortality as well as morbidity if at all the baby goes on to survive the situation. So necrotizing enterocolitis, another issue is about late onset sepsis. So next slide, please. So we all know that necrotizing enterocolitis is a disease of the premature guts. The gut or the bowel of the baby is not mature enough to handle the load of the nutrition. So, and along with some infectious cause, there is a inflammation of the bowel which leads to necrotizing enterocolitis. It can be quite a bit of severe to take life of the baby as well. So it is one of the important causes of morbidity as well as mortality of the premature babies. In other words, if you can control necrotizing enterocolitis, our survival rate of the premature babies and will also get impacted. So what is the role of, apart, we all know that management of probiotics, management of necrotizing enterocolitis in the NICU, whatever as per the stage of the disease, and the role of the associated cause of the late onset sepsis and the role of antibiotics as well. So our interest of today is what is the role of probiotics in necrotizing enterocolitis, if it can be of any help, if it can be of improve the survival. As we know, the immature preterm gut which is exposed to the newly colonizing commensals. So the when the baby is born, depending on the mode of deliveries, whether it is a normal vaginal delivery or a cesarean section, and thereafter what feed the baby is getting, whether it is your own mother's milk or donor's milk or formula milk, that determines the colonization of the infants or the newborn's gut. And that gut colonization goes a long way to establish the immune system as well as other things like the development of the NEC and other things. So there is a constant interaction between the things which are commensal or the development of the gut microbiota and the development of the immune system. Last time we discussed that in our webinar about immunity of the newborns. So in that sense, that whether the baby, if the baby is exposed to vaginal microflora, if the baby is exposed to own mother's milk, if the baby is exposed to formula milk, and how much amount of formula feed or the infection it has gone onto the microbiota has gone onto the intestine of the baby so as to develop the gut microflora. And all this, there is a host of interacting factors which decide the development of the NEC and tolerance of the feed and all. So whether in this complex scenario, administering some definite probiotics would help in reduction in incidence of necrotizing enterocolitis or not, thereby improving the survival of the preterm baby. Next slide. So what does probiotic does in the necrotizing enterocolitis? It promotes the colonization of the neonatal gut, and in that Bifidobacterium during early life is an quite of help, and quite a good amount of Bifidobacterium also contributes into the health status and protect the premature babies from different varieties of disease along with necrotizing enterocolitis. Next. So next slide, please. Yeah. So what is the mechanism of action? How does probiotics can help in reducing the incidence of necrotizing enterocolitis. So if you give certain kind of and certain amount of probiotics to a newborn baby, they can reduce the mucosal colonization by the pathogenic organism, thereby replacing the pathogenic organism, or they will not give the attachment site or the receptor site to the pathogenic organism, as they will colonize the newborn's gut already. So thereby reducing the chances that the pathogenic organism will colonize the newborn's gut, thereby giving rise to the starting of the pathogenesis of necrotizing enterocolitis. And obviously they will be once they colonize the newborn's gut, they will put a barrier to the translocation of the bacteria and other bacterial products like cytokines and other things, which into the pathogenesis of necrotizing enterocolitis. And over and above, as we all know that the administration of probiotics also modifies the immune system of the host or the host immune response, that as Dr. Muthuja has already elaborated a bit of it. So there is a interplay of different factors by which the probiotic also modifies the immune response of the host as well. Next slide. So what does the evidences tell us? There has been a host number of studies, more than 50, 60 randomized controlled trials, and there has been few meta-analysis as well. As I was going through the meta-analysis, so the meta-analysis say that use of probiotics definitely reduces the risk of NEC. It reduces the all-cause mortality. It reduces the incidence of late onset sepsis, which always almost goes hand in hand with necrotizing enterocolitis in the NICUs. All those nosocomial infections, late onset sepsis, the necrotizing enterocolitis, they happen almost all towards second week, third week, depending on the weight and gestational maturity of the baby. And it also reduces the feed intolerance. So the meta-analysis and systematic reviews tell us that there is a definite reduction in risk of NEC and late onset sepsis as well. So which babies are eligible for the probiotic supplementation to prevent or treat the development of NEC, rather for the prevention. So studies have found that babies who gain maximum from probiotic supplement weigh between 1 to 1.5 kg and of less than 32 weeks. Though people have given to babies who are less than 1 kilo, but studies have not found any statistically significant benefit in babies weighing less than 1 kilo. So we have to be a bit careful if we are giving in less than. So maximum amount of benefit you get in the babies weighing between 1 to 1.5 kilo and less than 32 weeks. So far as NEC and late onset sepsis is concerned. Next. So we have seen so many probiotics available, so many varieties of probiotic available, so many combinations of probiotic available, so many varieties of strain of the same specific species are available. So which probiotic to use? Whether it is single probiotic or should we go for a combination of probiotics? So as we have seen that Lactobacillus and Bifidobacterium, these are the two most common naturally occurring organisms. They colonize the intestine of human beings right from the early phase or early age of life. So studies have found that a combination of Lactobacillus and Bifidobacterium confers maximum amount of benefit to the host so far as NEC and late onset sepsis is concerned. And how much is the dose? How much to give? A dose of about 1.5 into 10 to the power 9 colony forming units per day would be the dose for babies who weigh between 1 to 1.5 kg. If you are waging for a baby more than 1.5 kg, say 1.5 to 2 kilo babies or 2.5 kilo baby, you can use a higher dose like 3 into 10 to the power 9 colony forming units per day of the combination of Lactobacillus and Bifidobacterium. Next. So when should we give this baby? So now we know whom to give and which one to give and when to start the baby. So studies have shown the benefit is maximum when you give as early as possible, because we know that infant gut is sterile when at birth. So when the baby is immediately born, the gut is definitely sterile. So it gets to colonize as soon as it is exposed to various environmental factors, including the mode of delivery, the type of feed, and other things. So as early as possible, people have started as early as 4 hours also, but the practical guideline would be to start when the baby is clinically stable and hemodynamically stable. There is no respiratory distress and other hemodynamic issues, and no shock and other circulatory compromise, and the baby is ready for to take or to start on enteral feeds. So that is the time when probiotic supplementation can be started. And till how long? Till how long we can give this? So when to stop? As we know that it is definitely till the time the baby is in NICU or till the time the baby attains a corrected gestational age of about 36 to 37 weeks, because at that time the risk of NEC during that gestational age or corrected gestational age, the risk of NEC obviously reduces to much lower level. And obviously with all this, there must be some questions in our mind that what are the risks and side effects. So the risks and side effects are obviously the probiotic sepsis, or if we know that the immunologic immaturity of the newborn, and more so for the premature babies. The premature babies or the preterm babies are immunologically definitely immature. So we will have our concerns definitely that whether exposing these premature babies who are immunologically not that competent to some amount of live microorganisms knowingly, whether this itself can cause the sepsis. So probiotic sepsis is definitely a risk factor or the side effect, you can say, and thereby it warrants strict microbiologic surveillance to all the babies who are given probiotics along that. So that's like a monitoring, microbiologic monitoring, sending a culture when clinically it is indicated or when something to start with or in between. So microbiologic surveillance is definitely necessary, and obviously clinical monitoring would be going on hand in hand every day.
Thank you, sir. Thank you, Dr. Ajit, sir, for a nice elaborative talk on the probiotics, the role of probiotics in preterm newborns. So as you are taking the safety of the concern, so I'm just talking something like GRAS, GRAS. GRAS means generally regarded as safe. So few probiotics which are generally regarded as safe, like Lactobacillus, Bifidobacterium, Lactococcus, and Saccharomyces. So as you know, the probiotics, they are the age-old products. In 1907, when great scientist Neville Makhnikov, he has seen the Bulgarian peasants, they are feeding on this fermented lactic acid milk, fermented by lactic acid. The longevity have increased a lot. And by seeing those things, he has invented the Bulgarian bacillus. That is the first probiotic invented, Bulgarian bacillus, and successively many scientists, Alfred Nizzel and Henry Tisser, they have invented Bifidobacterium, and another Japanese scientist, Shirota, we are getting Lactobacillus kg, strain is Shirota. So he is a Japanese scientist, he has developed the Lactobacillus kg Shirota. So next, coming to a novel use of, so after getting the common use of probiotics, now I am going to the next section, that is the novel use of probiotics. I would like to request Dr. Parida sir to cover the next topic, which is based on the allergy and the probiotics in allergy, atopy, and asthma. Dr. S. N. Parida sir, please.
Thank you. But we are almost nearing the time. You have got 1 hour. So
sir, we can rapidly cover up the session because these are very important also. So after that also we are having two short session from Dr. Mrityunjay and Dr. Ajit sir. Sir.
Well, I will come to like this because we have just discussed about the common topics we encountered almost day-to-day practice in use of probiotics. Now it is coming another branch or another little sidetrack from the normal use. It can be used for allergy and atopy. Well, allergy and atopy, they are the things which are mostly genetically determined, as well as this is somehow the little bit get influenced up to by the environmental factors. Well, the baby who are the kids who are prone to get allergy, they are determined from the birth. And nowadays, particularly when we have got a small family, the kids are living in a very healthy conditions in comparison to our previous generation or we ourselves, when we lived in a village, we lived in less hygienic condition, we are not getting allergy and atopy as often as the present kids are getting. So this has all got a immunological basis, and the body is tuned by the body is very tuned from the very beginning to whether the person will get allergy or not. Let me come to the real topics, real issues on atopy. Let us talk about atopic dermatitis. This is a chronic inflammatory as well as relapsing condition of the skin, and this is the incident is quite high. This is around 20% in both developed and developing countries. And India is now a developing country, and some part of the India can be taken as developed. If you take patches of India, they are developed. So incident of atopic dermatitis and allergic conditions, other allergic conditions like milk allergy, cow's milk protein allergy, that is CAMPA, which is also showing its increasing incidence. And this is characterized by skin barrier integrity is lost, inflammatory response against stimulants of various types, and this is also due to reduced antimicrobial response that incite abnormal inflammation in the skin. So these are the basic pathology of the kids who are getting atopic dermatitis. Next, please. So this is a pictorial interpretation how oral probiotics can also help in modifying the allergy, because oral probiotic for you take, they goes to the gut. The gut is the biggest immune system of the body, and it has got different glands, mesenteric glands, glands in the spleen, as well as lymph nodes, different site of lymph node, as well as the neural tissues. So this passes through the dendritic neurons of the intestine, and it exerts its action through that pathway only. So this will be very difficult to explain it because we are in a hurry. So let me skip it. But we can say that the allergic mechanism, by when you take probiotics, that starts through the gut and goes the reverse way. Anyway, next slide, please. And different probiotic has been used by different studies, and starting from Lactobacillus rhamnosus, Lactobacillus acidophilus, Lactobacillus casei, all these and Bifidobacterium brevis, these organisms or the probiotics has been studied in different conditions. Next, please. It is, I can't say that this is just only one probiotic which can be recommended for atopic dermatitis in children, but there are various probiotics has been recommended by different authors at different studies, and all of them are supposed to work. And I'll come to a few interesting things that we might be thinking that if you give probiotic to the mother during pregnancy, and if the child is not a high risk, if you give probiotic to the mother, it doesn't reduce the incidence of eczema. If you give only to the mother, people think that probiotics can be excreted in the breast milk and that can modify the baby's immune system. Most of the studies, they have found out that if it is only given to the mother, it doesn't. But if it is given to the mother, that means before the baby is born. That means starting from the last time of the pregnancy, or few people give it for the last month of pregnancy, and when the baby is born, like Dr. Arjit has told, that once the baby is stabilized, along with breastfeeding, you continue it for a couple of months, then chances of allergy is reduced. And it is not the chances of allergy only, but it all does reduce incident of asthma in later life. And the atopic dermatitis events, they are mostly covered till 2 years of age. Next, please. So these are few studies I am quoting: prenatal and postnatal supplementation with mixture of Bifidobacterium BGN4, that is the repository number, Bifidobacterium lactis, and Lactobacillus acidophilus is an effective approach in preventing development of eczema in infant at high risk or allergy during their first year of life. I have told you, if you give to the kids who are at high risk, because there is a definite history of allergy in the family, or one kid has been affected, well, they prenatal and postnatal can be tried, and that has shown to reduce the incidence of atopy or allergy. Lactobacillus rhamnosus GG in most studied probiotic in this field. Administration of LGG in early life have a role in food allergy prevention. I told you that cow's milk protein allergy is one of the emerging issues, particularly in the metros. In those circumstances, it might help. And you might be attending few seminars on milk allergy, and there are two types of milk available to avoid that. That is amino acid formula as well as extensively hydrolyzed casein formula. Amino acid formula is more expensive. It is not available in India. Hydrolyzed casein formulas are available, but that is the second step. If you do that hydrolyzed casein formula, you add Lactobacillus rhamnosus GG. This works well like amino acid formula. So my take next please. Next. No more. So my message to you that if you are handling with a kid who is at, or you expect a kid to be born who is at high risk of developing atopy or asthma or any other allergy, you can start from the mother, starting from the last trimester of the pregnancy, and continue probiotics beyond the birth. I mean, when the baby is born, after the baby is stabilized, you give it for a couple of months and see that in those circumstances it does help. But in one thing we have to be careful that don't expect that this will work for all time to come, because these effects are mostly visible till 2 years of age. After that, normally the baby's gut flora gets diversified by 6 months of age. In these circumstances, if you give it for 6 months or 8 months, well, that long the probiotic will work. Maybe it will work in an extended period for a time up to 2 years of time, but after that the things will change. And wheezing predisposition, those kids are wheezing because it has been seen that the mothers who have got an abnormal vaginal flora, when the baby is born to those mothers, which a mother who has colonized with Uroplasma urealyticum or Staphylococcus during pregnancy, their babies were mostly associated with wheezing or asthma by 5th year of life. So if you can modify the maternal vaginal flora in high risk neonates, then also you can get some benefit. Next please. So this is about development of asthma, and so I told you that you can modify the maternal vaginal flora by giving probiotic to the mother, and after the baby is born, these babies are a lesser risk. So I'm skipping few slides. So next, this is one. I think others will finish if time permits. I can talk about autism.
Thank you, sir. So to the audience, the administration of a solution of fecal matter from a donor to the intestinal tract of a recipient in order to directly change the recipient's gut microbial composition to get health benefit. This is called fecal microbial transplantation. So next topic will be taken by Dr. Arijit. So we are running short of time, so we'll have a 2 session after just this one, and next session we'll rapidly finish up the session and we'll go for question and answer. Thank you, sir. Please, sir. Arijit, sir.
Yeah. So rapidly covering this interesting topic, that next. The fecal microbiota transplant, or FMT, is the administration of a solution of fecal matter from a donor intestinal tract to a recipient in order to directly change the recipient's gut microbial composition, which will confer and health benefit. So next please. So it has been tried right from the 4th century in China, when it is known as yellow soup, and in some countries it has been, the maternal feces have been inserted into newborn's mouth, and in fact in 2013 FDA approved the procedure for recurrent infection with Clostridium difficile infection. So next please. So the most common and the indication for fecal microbiota transplantation is for recurrent resistant C. difficile infection, and other things like inflammatory bowel disease, irritable bowel syndrome, chronic constipation, and non-disorders like obesity, chronic fatigue, and autism are in experimental stage. But the only condition which has definite benefit is recurrent Clostridium difficile infection. And what I'd like to point out here is that the real indication is when there is a failure of the antibiotic therapy. We know that recurrent Clostridium difficile infection occurs in subjects who are subjected to prolonged duration of broad spectrum antibiotics. So to treat again another antibiotic, that is drug of choice is vancomycin, and sometimes along with metronidazole or in combination, or after that is also used. So the FDA approved indication for fecal microbiota transplantation is for the patients who have failed a course or two of the antibiotic therapy, that is vancomycin as well as metronidazole, in treating this. So the probiotics are usually next list. So they are carefully screened donors are taken. The donors has to be, there is a donor criteria as well. The FDA approved donor criteria is there, and this donor can give the fecal microbiota. So it can be either given through either upper GI tract or through lower GI tract. Through upper GI tract, if it can be given, then it is given in the form of a capsule, and in the from the lower GI tract, it is usually infused as a solution. Next, please. So coming to the probiotics and fecal microbiota transplant, the Human Microbiome and Microbiome Project is a novel ongoing research, but the complexity of this fecal microbiota is actively being defined and being changed, modified, and into the pathogenesis of many diseases in which the microbiota related dysregulation or gut microbiota dysregulation is there. But as on date, to take home message is the only established indication is recurrent failed Clostridium difficile infection, which fails to respond to vancomycin and metronidazole therapy. And the installation of maternal fecal matter into the newborn's mouth is an interesting thing. There are several studies were available. People have tried installing as soon as a baby is born. They have tried installing. Suppose why we call that all those babies who are born vaginally or for the vaginal delivery babies, the microbiota or the gut microbiota is much different from the babies who are developed by a cesarean section, because they are exposed to some amount of fecal microbiota, so that their gut gets colonized with fecal microbiota. So what people have tried, that they have taken some fecal material of the mother and tried to give it to the baby so as to develop the give a like a kickstart or the jump start to the baby's gut, so that it gets colonized with the good bacteria so as to confer a host benefit so far as feeding is concerned and other things are concerned. So
thank you, sir. Yeah, thank you, sir, for elaboration in a very new topic of fetal microbiota transport. So after that, I will be going to the last topic, the star topic of the day. All must have one question that does probiotic have any role in COVID-19? So Dr. Muthunyada, please.
So very important topic, because nowadays this is the burning topic, I can say, because COVID-19, anybody is interested if for any probiotics is there or any vitamin, anything, any vitamin C or anything, any naturotherapy is there for COVID-19. So what is the role of probiotic? Just I have gone through 2-3 literatures which has published recently in the month of March and April. So that I want to highlight over here. So what is the COVID-19 nowadays? It is only the SC2 receptor. So SC2 receptor is there in the long epithelium, which is being taken care by the receptor is there, and the viral capsid protein is attached there, and the symptoms are the viral replication occur, and finally the symptoms are occurring. Now where that important thing is that there is a angiotensin 2 level which is elevating with increased activity of angiotensin 1 receptor at the cost of SC2 receptor. So angiotensin 2 level is increasing. This leads to adverse fibrosis, hypertrophy, increased reactive oxygen species, vasoconstriction, and gut dysbiosis. Next slide, please. So this is the cascade. So you see angiotensin 2 is causing all these type of detrimental effect, whereas our protective effects is caused by antifibrotic, antioxidant, antihypertrophic. So we need something. Angiotensin 1 to 7 is to be replaced. So this is mostly important, which is not being there in COVID-19. This is being done. Detrimental effect is going on because of the angiotensin 2 level being increased. Next slide, please. So there is the study, the probiotics and SE2, ADAM17, a disintegrating and metalloproteinase 17 mediated proteolytic cleavage of SE2 is upregulated by endocytosed SARS-CoV-2 spike proteins. So activation of these 81 are by elevation of the angiotensin 2 levels also further increases ADM17 activity. ADM17 cleaves the primary substrate, releasing soluble TNF alpha, and TNF alpha along with systemic cytokines produce all this cytokine storm. Next slide, please. Now, this is the thing where we have already discussed. These are the cascades of mechanism which is being occurring in all the systems: blood, in the bone marrow, in the cardiovascular system, in the gut. So, in the gut also there is permeability, inflammatory changes, there is transmission changes, dysbiosis. All these things are also happening. Therefore, probiotics has got some role in the gut also. Next slide, please. Now, loss of SE2 on the luminal surface of the gut alters microbiota profiles, facilitating dysbiosis, which I already discussed in that diagram, and SARS-CoV-2 causes enteric or pulmonary infection. So we know that some of the enteric type of infections are also occurring in SARS-CoV-2, that is abdominal pain, vomiting, cramp-like sensation. So pulmonary is there, but abdominal symptoms are also persisting in COVID-19. Now, probiotics can normalize the gut-lung axis and heal the dysbiosis, thereby improvement the cytokine storm or improvement of the COVID-19 features. Next slide, please. Now, this is the study which I got from the Lancet. The summary of the study is during the COVID-19 pandemic, 2 to 47% of the infected patients required invasive mechanical ventilation. So, 2 randomized control trials showed that critically ill patients on mechanical ventilation who were given probiotics, especially Lactobacillus rhamnosus, GG, Lactobacillus subtilis, and Enterococcus faecalis, developed substantially less ventilator-associated pneumonia. So this is the published just recently in the April 20 that I got yesterday. Next slide, please. However, animal studies showed Lactobacillus acidophilus and Bacillus clausii did not reduce coronavirus receptor expression in the murine small intestine compared with the control. So animal studies they have done, but they have not confirmed that they are having some good effect. Next slide, please. So blind use of conventional probiotics for COVID-19 is not recommended until we have further understanding of the pathogenesis on the gut microbiota. So as of now, probiotics recommendation is not officially announced by either ICMR or WHO. Next slide, please. So this is a BioGaia study. BioGaia has its own strain of Lactobacillus reuteri, DSM 17938, has been shown to protect against some upper respiratory infections, but there is no scientific rationale of using probiotics to protect, prevent, or treat COVID-19 or SARS-CoV-2. So this has got some effect on gastrointestinal problems as well as respiratory problems from 6 months to 3 years of age. But still, this data on COVID-19 they are silent. So this is also another study, BioGaia study. Next, please. So Bifidobacterium animalis is highly likely to prevent the replication of coronavirus by reducing the endoplasmic reticulum stress-related autophagy. So this is now a very good mechanism which we want to understand. So any type of COVID-19 infection that undergoes the endoplasmic reticulum stress, and endoplasmic reticulum stress releases a lot of cytokines, lot of enzymes that lead to autophagy. Autophagy means it is the automatic or autocell, own cell destruction, and also it has got interleukin 17. This endoplasmic reticulum also has got interleukin 17 activity. So we need to decrease the interleukin 17 activity as well as we lead to this endoplasmic reticulum stress related activity. And Bifidobacterium animalis has likely to prevent both these two, and especially more of endoplasmic reticulum stress over the anti-interleukin 17 effect. So this has also mild effect, but this is again, next slide please.
Thank you.
This is one thing I want to say. This is a hypothetical study. I don't want to confirm that this study which is being published is taken as the guideline to use this Bifidobacterium in the treatment of COVID-19. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Dr. Mrutyunjay. So just before we'll go for a question answer session. So before going for question answer session, just I'll conclude for the viewer that probiotic have clearly established as an adjuvant in management of acute diarrhea and antibiotic associated diarrhea. and probiotic appears to be promising in management of Clostridium difficile colitis, atopic diseases, NEC, and inflammatory bowel disease. But further well-designed clinical trials involving large number of patients are mandatory to achieve the definite evidence of preventive and curative role of probiotic in other medical practice. So I will hand over to Dr. Susruth for the question and answer session. A lot of questions are there. Dr. Susruth, please.
So thank you, Dr. Ranjit. It's a pleasure to be a part of this webinar because it went so smoothly and so informative, and with so senior and knowledgeable panelists. It's truly a successful webinar. We have doctors from all over India, as well as one or two international doctors also, one from Singapore. So it's a pleasure to get many questions from them. So I can only take a few questions. Constant of time. So, sir, is there any role of probiotics in case of autism?
Yeah, well, this is for me. I think I can answer that. Autism, you know, it is a neurodevelopmental disorder. It has, and the kids, they have got a lot of associated abdominal conditions which aggravate their abnormal behavior pattern. And it has with autism, they have got a abnormal gut flora in comparison to other kids. And the kids, particularly those who have got more abdominal symptoms, definitely their gut flora is different. So it has been postulated that if you give, but these abnormal GI problems are the troubling GI problems which troubles the kid as well as the parents, because autism is a lifelong disorder for the parents as well as for them it is very difficult to handle. So it is not only the abnormal gut flora per se which produces this, but they have got a different malabsorption and hypersensitive to different food also. Though the normal medical treatment, and the pediatricians, normal pediatricians, they do not recommend a special food for autism, but there is an alternative medicine group who always recommend a specialized diet for autism, which, well, this is very controversial. This is many people accept it, many people don't accept it, because it goes without saying that the kids who are getting very special diet, they are at a risk of malnutrition as well as impaired brain cell growth. So some of the kids, they do benefit by giving them probiotics in their diet. But how long you have to continue, because autism is a lifelong disorder. So whether you give it for lifelong, you give it for 6 months, there is no definite study to indicate that. But it has been tried and it has found that it does help. So it depends upon the primary physician who is taking care of the kid to decide whether to give it or not.
And in the last webinar on autism, the expert also pointed out that there was a study which studied the gut-brain axis and the metabolites which are produced, which can be eliminated with the use of probiotics, but there is no solid evidence to recommend probiotics as a therapeutic modality in autism. So as sir has explained, it is under trial.
Also, another thing is that the alternate food which is recommended for these kids are pretty expensive, and most of them, they're not available in India. And the parents are forced or coaxed to buy them from outside. You might have heard during this lockdown, one parent from Bombay,
Yeah, camel milk.
Camel milk, and it was specially procured by the Indian Railways. So it is something like that situation.
Yes. And one very common question that has been asked by many of the participants, are one of the very popular probiotics right now in the commercially available is Bacillus thuringiensis. So does it has any advantage over any other probiotics like which we are using, like Saccharomyces boulardii, Bifidobacterium, Lactobacillus jejii? So is Bacillus thuringiensis any way superior? Any of the panelists can take up this when it comes to diarrhea.
I want to say about this. If we have to compare, there is no head-to-head trial of this Bacillus thuringiensis, Lactobacillus reuteri, Saccharomyces boulardii. These are the 3 most important probiotics which are used most commonly in nowadays. So there is no head-to-head trial, especially in our country. There are some foreign or in European no such trial, so we cannot compare that. Bacillus thuringiensis is anyway better than Lactobacillus reuteri or Lactobacillus reuteri better. But evidences say that Lactobacillus reuteri and Saccharomyces boulardii, they are helpful in acute diarrhea and antibiotic-associated diarrhea. So there are plenty of evidences conferring this. But about Bacillus thuringiensis superiority, there is no such data. Anyone to add to this?
Yeah, Dr. Joseph, you want to add
Yeah.
something?
So basically, Bacillus thuringiensis that is not a heat stable probiotic. So there is a high chance of denaturation, and if you will compare the recent probiotic of Bacillus subtilis and Bacillus coagulans, those are spores and those are more heat stable. So few studies are there going on comparing head-to-head comparison. So those shows that coagulants and subtilis are little bit better in terms of heat stability, and the spores are there. The regeneration is much better in subtilis and coagulants.
As per WHO evidence level, the evidence level for Lactobacillus GG and Saccharomyces boulardii and even for Bifidobacterium is much more when it comes to Bacillus thuringiensis, because even in Indian study, there are very few Indian study, well-published Indian study for Bacillus thuringiensis. We need more study, at least local study, to take it as a solid evidence. So then another question from Dr. Ashutosh Mahapatra. I think this is a very interesting and a very pertinent question. Dr. Ashutosh has asked that when we are recommending probiotics and we have evidence that probiotics is really reducing the duration of diarrhea, at least in acute watery diarrhea, then why neither IAP nor the National Diarrhea Control Program has officially recommended probiotics as a modality?
Well, I think I have responded to the question by when all the panelists were talking. I have responded to Ashutosh's question by typing it. Well, this is true. What Ashutosh has told, he is very conscious because nobody is recommending. Still, people are telling that you use it. It is true because first thing that I have, if you look at my slide, you are the best dose I have told you. It does work, but there are other things also which work better. If you have got ORS, if you have got zinc, if you give vitamin A, you provide ORS at the right time, you don't starve the child, you give it proper food to eat, well, the child gets better anyway. Because most of the cases are rotavirus, and by 7-8 days, the child is off and on it. So the cost of the probiotics is one thing, and well, it is, if you can afford it, someone can afford it, and he wants to get his kid better within 3 days, well, he can. But Ashutosh can do that. He has got the category of patients who can afford it, but maybe someone else who is right.
Very nice explanation, sir. So another interesting question. This is probably, I think Dr. Arjit will be the best person to answer this. This is question. There are many questions from this doctor, Dr. Galaxy A50.
Yeah, I'm also saying who's Dr. Galaxy A50.
So please reveal yourself. So he has asked that there is brands like, even from our sponsor Tablet India, there is brands like ResearchNet, which is Bifidobacterium brevi M160V number.
Sir, RescueNet, that Bifidobacterium brevi M16V, probably.
RescueNet, Bifidobacterium brevi. So, sir, do you have any personal experience while using probiotics, Bifidobacterium in renown? I think you have a publication and you can explain this very nicely.
Well, not really. Not in preterm babies. See, as Dr. Parida has already told, you are the best judge. Okay, number one. Number two is, what is the evidence? So the evidence, we have meta-analysis mainly by few meta-analysis and systematic review, which is mainly done by Dr. Sanjay Patole from Australia, that it has benefit in terms of reduction of late onset sepsis, reduction of incidence of which sounds very interesting. It's very interesting that if giving something reduces all-cause mortality, late onset sepsis, NEC, so naturally I'd be interested to give that. But why today it is not a standard practice. And as Dr. Asutosh asked and Dr. Parida explained, why no scientific body like AAP, IAP, and or the WHO, UNICEF, Government of India has, if it is so beneficial, they must have been advocated, and it must have also come into the policy things. Why it has not come? So you have to look bit into the systematic review, which I was going through, and I found the bit disturbing fact is, see, the statistics is very jugglery thing. You know, statistics it conceals more than it reveals. So you have to really be very scientifically or very integratedly to interpret it. The NNT is the number needed to treat. So what is the NNT for LOS and what is the NNT for NEC? Suppose you treat the number of babies. So how many babies you have to treat to get one reduction in NEC or LOS? So the systematic review says NNT for LOS is 50 and NNT for NEC is 25, which is scary. So virtually you have to treat 50 babies to have one reduction in late onset sepsis, and you have to treat 25 babies. That means, in other words, you treat 49 babies unnecessarily to get benefit or reduction in one case of late onset sepsis. So whether it is warranted, whether it is justified to treat another 49 babies, and again, as we already discussed, that newborns, most of premature newborns are immunologically not competent. So putting those babies into the risk of probiotic associated sepsis and other things. And also there are confounding variables are there. So though multivariate analysis, they have done a very good multivariate analysis and found out that it has a benefit. But again, the confounding variables are too much. As we know, a baby of 1.2 kilo remaining in NICU for say about 3 weeks, developing NEC, late onset sepsis, and how many things, other things would have been done and happened to that baby. That baby would have been got multiple antibiotics, would have gone into maybe immunoglobulins, maybe the baby would have got some other ventilation, this, that, surfactant, and again there. So whether that benefit which is given by the probiotic is the real benefit. So to get that, you have to treat 50 babies. So whether that is warranted. So that is the question. So that is why I think it has not yet come into the practice, or it is a standard of practice. What you call it standard of practice. It is not a standard of practice as on date, though systematic review says it has definite benefit and statistically significant benefit. So I think that would answer some of the questions, but still it remains as a debate.
Thank you so much. Sir, another very common thing, but it's very interesting that, sir, in a normal newborn, as we know, there is a physiological lactose influence and the child passes stool 15-20 times a day.
I don't get the question.
Yes, Dr. Parida will take up. Can we give a probiotic?
No, I don't get the question.
This is from Dr.
Okay,
Gupta,
what is the question?
Dr. D.K. Gupta. So the question is, in a normal newborn who is passing 15-20 stool, we know that it is normal. The mother is very, very bothered.
Yes.
Can we at least give a probiotics? Is it safe and is it justified?
I get it. Well, the studies so far, I am not talking of newborn, but studies so far says that a normal person should not take probiotics. Any normal person should not take probiotics to avoid if you are taking it for hypertension, if you are taking for diabetes, obesity, or you can prevent asthma, those things are not needed for normal person. And the same thing also holds good for the newborn baby, because a newborn baby has got his own gut microbiota, which is going to develop and diversify by the age of 6 months, so that by the time the adult population will take over. If you give probiotics, you are going to modify it. If the modification is for good, it is better. As our study, what we have done with Arjit, that if you modify the baby's gut, well, by giving Lactobacillus plantarum for first 2 weeks of life, it can prevent late onset sepsis and it can reduce the incidence of pneumonia. It was a research study which recommended that for a normal baby, time recommended to give at all.
This is a very good explanation for not to give probiotics. And another interesting question, Dr. Bija, there are two parts of the question that, as we know that probiotics are living organism and cannot survive a it's safe to prescribe probiotics in any PUO along with antibiotic because is there any contraindication of probiotic? I think Dr. Murthyunjay can take up this question.
Actually, to say in any PUO, there is no recommendation to add any type of probiotics because antibiotics associated diarrhea occurs only in few. Not all antibiotics can cause antibiotic associated diarrhea. So probiotics used to be limited because probiotics use also has its own side effect. Even if you use probiotics inadvertently or you use excessive probiotic, you may get fungal sepsis because of the Saccharomyces boulardii. You may get also histamine release, some secondary reactions like headache or migraine type of thing, or also abdominal distension, bloating also can occur as a side effect of probiotic. So even if there is recommendation to give probiotics in antibiotic associated diarrhea, those antibiotics if you are giving, try to give, but for few days, 4 to 5 days. But antibiotics as per se at proper doses, proper duration may not cause antibiotic associated diarrhea. But in certain situations they can cause where we can give. And the second part of the question is what?
Because this is the probiotics is a living organism, can it survive a high grade fever?
Probiotic high grade fever means gut, it is inside the gut. So it has to survive inside. So that is being taken in the gut. So that is no issue in the high grade fever of the skin
And
temperature.
as sir has already mentioned, because probiotics is a living organism, definitely we should be cautious in writing probiotics to a immunocompromised child because with Saccharomyces boulardii, till now at least 8 to 9 cases of fungemia has been described in world literature. So we should be a little bit cautious while prescribing them. So he has asked that in Singapore, this probiotics like Lactobacillus reuteri has been approved for cases like hand-foot mouth disease. So, is there any Indian study? This is a novel use of antibiotic probiotics that it can be used for hand-foot mouth disease. I think there is no Indian study. Right now, we have Lactobacillus reuteri preparation for infantile colic, but probably I have heard somebody that this is a novel way of approaching hand-foot-mouth disease, and sir has already explained how it helps in corona when it is a viral disease also. So maybe there is some indication, but we don't have any Indian study. I think we are coming to the end of the session, and all the questions are over. If the moderator allows, we can wind up the session.
No,
Yeah.
Dr. Sushrut, there was a question regarding the NRC, that all children are given amoxicillin, all the newborns admitted there, they are given amoxicillin. And the
Actually, this was not about probiotics. Anyway, the question was from Rajendra Kumar Singh.
Yeah.
Dr. Rajendra has asked that in institutional management of severe acute malnutrition,
Yes.
the NRC center, they have a standard of starting amoxicillin to all the kids. Is it justified? So because this is not in our area of probiotics, I have skipped. So if Dr. Parida as the senior most
I can answer a part of it because the studies on malnutrition from different countries, well, not from India, but the studies which are available from African countries, what they say that even severe acute malnutrition with edema or without edema, if you give probiotics to them, it doesn't benefit them immediately. What it benefits that by the time they go home, the relapse rate is less. And they don't come back with frequent another attack of diarrhea, something like that. But they don't benefit in the early stages of the disease. Early stage, what is recommended that you have to give proper diet, whatever recommended the diet. And if what he's telling that amoxicillin is given, maybe they suspect that the child has got pneumonia or something for which amoxicillin is given. But be careful in,
yes, this is
Yeah. Actually, the WHO has recommended for public health benefit that most of the children below 5 years who are admitted in NRC, they are more prone for infection. So basically, just to give a universal coverage to all the children, for the benefit of doubt, amoxicillin has been recommended in the dose of 45 milligram per kg per dose in only BD dose. So this has been recommended for 3 to 5 days. Like in IMNCI, for any suspected pneumonia case, the health worker will start amoxicillin, and then they will send it to the hospital or to the doctor or clinician for further assessment. So similarly, NRC also, they are and it is based on a checklist, like these symptoms will be there, and based on that only they start. So it is a universal, like it is a WHO recommendation. So we don't have much interference into it.
Thank you, sir.
So I think we have exceeded by 40 minutes and we should conclude the session. So first of all, thank you, Dr. Sabath and Dr. Prasanna Kumar Sahu to chair this session on behalf of IFP Orissa, and all our learned panelists, our moderator, they have done a very good job for this excellent webinar, and platform for a seamless discussion and a knowledge sharing. And lastly, to the coordinator himself for coordinating this event. So thank you so much. And also the participants. I think still we have more than 70-80 participants with us. And thank you for joining in.
The maximum number was 127.
Yes.
What I am at.
It was nice people being interested about probiotics and discussing in detail. So thank you everybody for this beautiful session. And we will come back with some other topic next time. So thank you so much.
Okay, thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you, everybody. Bye.
Mr. Sandeep.
Yeah, sir. In fact, I'm absolutely thankful to all of you for an exciting session which exceeded by around 40 minutes. Right. So that is the most interesting part, and still now. I find that around 70 plus audience are present over here. So sir, on behalf of Tablets India, before I say a big thank you to all the members and all the esteemed members of the Indian Academy of Pediatrics Orissa branch, I am absolutely thankful to the chairperson, to the three eminent panelists, the coordinator and the moderator. And sir, on behalf of Tablets India, I thank all of you. We really value your time, and I'm sure that this web talk will certainly add some more value to your clinical practice. Sir, we are dedicated to serve you more efficiently and look forward to your continued support in the days to come. You know, being a house of probiotic, we do have our entire Bifilac range or the Bifilac GG, and some questions came. Yes, just one information I should say, that RescueNet, that Bifidobacterium brevi M16V, Tamil Nadu government, now it is available as a part of the government supply also. So with that, I thank all of you for being a part of this. I think thank all the audience. Thank you, sir. And stay safe, stay healthy. And I'm concluding the session with that. I'm in future, we would love to have such session, but I think I got a clue. More than not, we will not keep for 1 hour. We have to keep for 2 hours. The entire session has gone up to now at least 1 hour 54 minutes. So I must thank the audience for keeping his patience, and all of you for joining here today.
Thank you.
Sir, thank you very much. Thank you. Good night. Stay safe, stay healthy, sir. Thank you.
Thank you.